Before the town stirs, the road is already waiting, stones worn smooth, milestones patient, and the ferry still as glass. Adjust to a comfortable volume and rest well. Good night. The sky is a deep blue bowl, cool and depthless, when the first cart creaks onto the frost-silvered road. The horse exhales a cloud that drifts like a ghost and fades. Above the distant wall, a watchfire is an ember behind crenelles, and the town gate is a tall, patient shadow. The carter rubs his hands together and flexes his fingers in wool gloves patched at the palms. He listens to the friendly complaints of his wheels, notes the rattle in the left rear pin, and makes a promise to oil it later. The road here remembers thousands of feet, iron hoofs and iron thoughts. It is worn smooth where the world has passed and passes still. Another cart joins, then another, a slow congregation of early merchants and their plain miracles, a shawled woman with onions braided like dull lanterns, a young man who smells faintly of beeswax, with the sleep still folded in his hair, a pair of sisters with baskets of eggs cushioned in straw that whispers when they breathe. Their lanterns, few and cautious, pool warm circles on the road. Between those circles lies the hush of the hour before bargaining, the hour that keeps secrets. From the wall, a small cough echoes, a gate warden stamping his feet, measuring the pale east. His spear butt ticks against the stone with the same small rhythm as a clock that no one has seen but everyone obeys. He knows the faces here, knows the creak of old Vorin's harness, the habit of Mistress Dan to hum just there when the cold gets into her teeth. He knows, too, that every morning is faithful in its own shape, like a prayer repeated and never quite the same. A bakehouse within the walls wakes its ovens, and the memory of yesterday's loaves walks out to meet the road. It carries with it a little courage. People straighten. The woman with onions tucks a stray hair into her scarf. The beeswax fellow checks the leather thong around his bundle of tapers. The sisters count quietly, 1 and 20, 2 and 20, 3, and smile at the number. Somewhere behind them, a mule shakes its bell, the note soft as a spoon tapped against a cup. Packmen bring small kingdoms on their backs, blue thread, tin buttons, a single bolt of veiling wrapped against dew. They speak little now. Words are coins, better to spend them when the gate opens and the day begins to listen. Mist makes the hedges seem taller. Beneath the cart the frost softens and the earth remembers it is earth. A child too young to up, too glad to be sleeping, glances from a blanket on a wagon bed and sees the star of the morning refuse to leave. He tucks that star away in his pocket, where children keep their best treasures, and sleeps again. The gate warden calls down, not loud, more like a greeting to the sun. The chain sighs, wood speaks to wood. Bars lift, hinges consider their duty and accept it. The gate's mouth opens, slow as a yawn. The first light of the day spills across iron studs and old scars, and the road becomes a ribbon drawing everything forward. In they go one by one, onions and eggs, wax and hope, careful wheels and warmed hands. The lanterns are doused, the world brightens by its own means. On the threshold, each passer dips just slightly toward the gate, toward the custom of safe return, toward the sense that here the town begins, and with it The markets promise not only to trade goods, but to trade glances and news and kindness. Within, the square is mostly shadow and memory, but a few awnings have already remembered their shapes. A rope thumps a post, a canvas coughs and unfurls. The fountain mutters to itself about stones and water and tide. A cat proceeds like a minor lord, inspecting those who have arrived early to pay their respects. The carter finds his accustomed place, sets the brake, pats the horse's shoulder. He opens the cart's tail and arranges his crates not for defense but for welcome. The sisters build their little hill of straw and plant eggs in it like moons. The beeswax man sets out his tapers, pale soldiers ready to bring small warmth wherever it is needed. Now the square begins to name itself. The cheesemonger's corner, the tinker's bench by the cracked pillar, the basket maker's lean-to under the elm. The town is a map whose streets are drawn in habits, and every market morning redraws them in softer lines. A knot slips in a rope above, and the stall's canvas gives a sudden flap like a sail catching wind and settles again with a smack. The stallholder nods, tests the knot once more, and rubs beeswax on the cord to tame it. He hangs his weights in a neat row, half-pound, quarter-pound, the little acorn weight that is a delight to look upon and exact to use. A widow with 3 jars of pickled pears lays a square of clean linen across her table. She does not set the jars down at once. She holds each to the dawn and studies what the light thinks of it. Only when the glow pleases her does a jar take its place. She counts out the coppers for the day's fee and folds the pouch twice so it makes no noise against her apron. A boy with a crooked smile is sweeping last year's leaves from the stones near the fountain. He gathers them carefully around a sleeping cat, building a dry nest that the cat accepts as tribute. When he's done, he makes a tiny crown of twigs and sets it on the cat's head. The cat yawns like a lord receiving a petition and remains where it is. The baker's assistant arrives balancing a tray of small loaves, testers for the early mouths. He breaks one open, and the seam releases steam that smells of patience and grain. The crust sings as it cools, and the sound is like rain on a shield left to dry. A few coins pass hand to hand, but more loaves are shared for news. News travels oddly, a loose tooth in a water wheel upriver, a calf born with a white star on its shoulder, a peddler who swears the southern road is lined with wild roses this year, a rumor that the old bridge has shifted by the span of a hand. None of this is urgent, all of it is important, because it makes the roads in people's minds. The gate admits a small caravan of pack mules, each with bells muffled. Their driver lifts a palm and the line stops with the tidiness of practice. He checks every strap, then checks the checks and mutters a blessing to the piece of river shell tied to his lead rope. The caravan master has a face like weathered leather and a voice that has learned to be soft in order to be heard. He and the gate warden trade courtesies. Toll will be paid at the waystall. The bells may ring after noon. The cudgels stay peace-tied. The master agrees, and as he passes he whispers the sort of gossip watchman-like. A new baker at Eastford bakes with fennel seed. A friendly dog at the ford will carry a stick across the current if you throw it upstream. Someone is mending the mile markers beyond the ash grove. A man with a scar like a quill mark along his jaw kneels to fix a wheel pin for the carter with the rattle. He refuses payment, takes instead 2 onions and a story, and is satisfied with the bargain. A good market keeps its own accounts, not only coin and measure, but favors, sightings, and songs. 2 sisters arrange their eggs in the straw hill, the way their grandmother taught them. A pale arc, a brown arc, a pale arc, the colors making a soft wave like sand where the tide has been. They lay 3 cracked shells in a little dish near the front. Not for sale, but as a promise that accidents have already happened to someone else today and will leave you in peace. The beeswax seller warms his hands over a lantern, then strokes each taper once from wick to heel to smooth it. He lines 12 soldiers on a plank and whispers a proverb he learned from a choir woman. Small lights gather great dark. He doesn't know why it still comforts him, but it does. From the corner by the elm comes the mild hammering of the tinker setting up, a plank on barrels, a loop of wire for hanging kettles, a nest of rivets in a jar that chimes when he moves it. He tests the bellows for his little brazier. It wheezes like an old friend laughing. The sun raises its voice, gilding a roof tile, then the handrail of the well, then the curve of the fountain's lip. Shadows crawl into their proper places and begin to behave. The square takes on its market geometry, and strangers learn where to walk simply by following the lines of light. A shepherd arrives with cheese rounds wrapped in cloth, each marked with a pressed thistle head. He breathes into his hands and asks whether any cat here is a hunter, because his wagon has become too interesting to mice. The boy with the broom points ceremoniously to the crowned cat, which pretend not to hear. A magistrate appears long enough to be seen and not long enough to be spoken to. He inspects nothing in particular and everything in general, then leaves behind the impression that order has been reminded of itself. The square obliges by straightening its shoulders and lowering its voice. A man with a lute walks the circle once, to learn where echoes gather best. He is this a jongleur of great reputation? He is a man who loves the noble pluck of gut and the way a single note could calm a restless child. He tests a chord so quiet that only the fountain and the crowned cat seem to notice. The smell of spices comes in like a rumor, pepper sharp as a quick thought, cinnamon like a beloved room, saffron threads bright as sunrise caught and kept. No one can afford much, not really, but almost everyone buys a smell, which is the cheapest wealth. The spice seller folds paper cones with priestly care. The weighman sets his beam, and the beam sets the morning's fairness. Coins are weighed, cloth is measured against the ell, bags are tested for truth. A clipped grow turns up. The buyer winces. The seller frowns. The weighman nods once, and an oath replaces the coin. Trust, when entered in the ledger, is a currency that holds its value. From the city's narrow mouth of an alley comes a small cart of brooms, each tied with a ribbon so that a buyer could remember which bundle is theirs. The broom-maker's daughter walks beside, offering straw mice to children whose hands are empty. She keeps one for herself, a crooked one, because crooked things are lucky for travelers. A woman with a red scarf sits on the fountain's rim and takes off her shoes. She is a pilgrim, only a tired mother, but she rubs her feet with the same reverence pilgrims have. She rests one hand on her belly, where a child is nearly ready to meet the world, and whispers to the water that the road is smooth for those who must take it today. The day finds its stride. Voices build and fall like wind among canvas. Bargains happen with the same respectful rhythm as greetings at a church door. A dropped apple rolls in a circle, is retrieved by the lute player, who bows to his own applause from the boy with the broom. A pair of monks pass with saddlebags of books, the leather softened by age and handling. They ask for directions to a notary and are given 3, each true in its way. One monk laughs gently and says that all right roads meet, even if they are slow to agree about it. He buys a small cone of saffron for the infirmary kitchen and tucks it into his sleeve. A gust catches the stall of a ribbon seller and sends a spill of color across the square, greens like new barley, blues like distant hills, a red that makes the heart count itself. Children stand in awe as if a flock of tame birds had landed. The seller lets them look and even touch, because looking is a kindness that costs nothing. Near noon, the bells of the abbey roll across the roofs, measuring the day for those who have no sand glass. People glance up, the way fields might look at the sun, then return to their prices and their stories. The gate warden relaxes his shoulders. The square has become its best self. Later, clouds gather soft as folded wool, and the light gentles. The tinker mends a kettle whose lip has forgotten how to pour. He warms solder until it shines like a promise, then breathes on the seam to bless it. He says to the owner, "Now it will pour even in a hurry," which is the same as wishing the household patience. The carter, with the newly quiet wheel, buys a loaf for the road home. He takes one bite now, as if to greet the evening in advance, then wraps the rest in a cloth that smells faintly of lavender. He touches the horse's neck and says nothing at all, because words would be too small for gratitude. Toward dusk, the air cools like water settling in a basin. The lute player finds his echo again and plays a tune that rises no higher than the rafters of a tavern. People listen without stopping what they are doing. The tune slips through their work like a thread that strengthens the cloth. Stalls begin to close with the quiet vocabulary of knots undone. The widow gathers her coppers and sets aside 2 jars for the night watch. The sisters lay a straw over the last eggs, as if putting a child to bed. The spice seller seals his chest with a ribbon and presses it with an old seal that has seen cities the square has only heard of. Watchmen light the first torches along the lanes. Flame halos bloom, then settle into their slow breathing. The crowned cat rises, shakes the leaves from its mantle, and proceeds to inspect the lanes, a lantern's companion and a guardian of crumbs. The gate warden makes one last note in a book that holds no secrets and many comforts. How many carts came, how many went, whether the river smell carried to the square today, whether the wind was friendly. He writes that it was, then closes the book with a palm that lingers. When the last awning sighs and folds, the square reveals the stones beneath like a face after a hat is removed. The fountain sounds louder without company, but not lonelier. It speaks of hills and channels and the patient work of falling. A child brings back the twig crown, now lopsided, and sets it on the fountain's rim, where the water and try it on. Carts roll out under a sky that has learned its stars again. Wheels pass through lantern pools and into shadow. Hooves pick up the road's remembered song. People speak more softly now, saving the largeness of the day for tomorrow. The road takes them as the sea takes boats, rocking them into the first rhythms of sleep. At the last, the gate is drawn to, but not shut against hope. A watchfire settles to coals, and someone hums the lute's tune without meaning to. The town keeps a corner of its heart awake for travelers who must arrive late. The torch by the post is left lit, and the measure of that mercy is small and endless. Let us sit a while longer on the fountain's edge. The stones are cool now, but not unfriendly. The water keeps time for us. When we rise, we will take the road at our own pace, carrying breadcrumb quiet and the bell note of mules, the soft rasp of canvas, and the even breath of a town asleep. The road speaks in signs for anyone who has learned the alphabet of travel. A pile of stones chooses a hilltop like a quiet beacon. A post leans a little where frost once pushed at its feet. A wall of hedges bends inward as if to say, "Keep this line and you will be welcomed." The morning is clear. Today we will read. The first marker stands at the fork beyond the mill stream. A hand is carved upon it with a finger that points northeast. Time has rounded the knuckle. Lichen has painted the nail. Still the hand points with useful grace. A drover touches the wrist in greeting. He tells the boy that he has followed this hand since he himself could barely reach it. He says that a good marker is a friend who never grows tired of repeating itself. Below the hand are letters that name towns and distances. The letters are not all from one century. Some are deep and square, some are thin and nervous. This does not matter. The road keeps a chorus of hands and voices. Travelers need only the tune. Beyond the fork, a low mound rises with a circle of flat stones on top. People leave pebbles there without quite knowing why. The boy asks what the mound is for. A monk who walks with the caravan says it keeps the memory of someone who once took food from his own mouth so that another might walk on. The story has errors and dents, but the feeling of it remains true. They leave pebbles, they walk on. A milestone shows itself half buried in grass. The face is worn, but the number 5 still lifts like a small hill from the stone. The master clears the grass with his boot heel and sets the number free again. He grins at the group. He says 5 more to the river. His voice adds a little strength to tired legs. Numbers help when the count is shared in the open. At a bend, a hawthorn grows around a post. The branches wear scraps of ribbon that have almost let go of their color. The ribbons are wishes. Some were tied in joy. Some were tied in trouble. The wind has read every one and keeps them in its own ledger. The god ties a thread from his cuff. He says the thread is it a wish. It is a promise to be careful. The hawthorn accepts either without judgment. The road crosses a field where short stones line the edge like teeth. Drovers say the stones are saints laid on their sides. Farmers say no such thing. Either way, the stones hold the line of travel the way a comb holds the order of hair. The boy walks along them and taps each with a stick. The taps make a small song of steps completed. At noon, the sun looks straight down and the shadows of markers become thumbprints on the road. The caravan rests by a post that shows a notch where a thirsty traveler once hung a water skin. Someone has tied a clay cup there for anyone who will promise to return it. The cup is unbroken. People are mostly good when the rules are simple. The master carries a pouch with small tools for kindness. In it are a stub of charcoal for refreshing letters, a square of tallow to protect wood from rain, a tiny brush for sweeping moss from numbers, and a bit of flax line for tying a loose plank on a bridge. He says that every traveler should leave things a measure better than found. He says this while he rubs tallow into a post foot, and the post stands a little straighter afterward. A pair of stones kneel near a marsh path. Once they stood tall. Now they bow and serve as seats for those who need to think. The boy wonders whether stone minds dream. The monk says stones hold the patience that people borrow when they must wait for better weather. He puts his hand on one and becomes quiet for a time that feels right. A carving of an arrow peers from under ivy on a church wall. The arrow points to a wicket gate that leads to a green and a well. The arrow saves a mile. The caravan enters and takes water. The sexton nods through the open door. He knows travelers by their gait. He knows honest steps from reckless ones. He sets a bucket where the next group will see it, and the bucket winks in the light like a good idea made visible. In a narrow valley, the wind has polished a line of stones until they shine like old coins. The path bends to follow them. There is no post here because nature has already drawn one. The master lays his palm on the bright rock and smiles. He says that some guides speak without letters. The road climbs to a ridge and the country opens in 3 directions. Paths splay like the ribs of a fan. At the center, a single post holds 4 arms. Each arm names a valley. Long ago, someone cut a star into the top. The star is out for show. It holds rain away from the heart of the wood so that the post lasts longer. The boy thinks about a star that protects by shedding water and decides that ideas can be tools. They eat near the post, bread and pears and a bit of salted meat. The guard shows the boy a trick for reading distance by looking along the post arm in line with a hill beyond it. The air trembles just above hot ground. The guard says the shimmer will be absent if rain waits along that road. The boy squints and feels wise even before he is right. Down the far side they find a stone that a mason loved. The mason carved a little face into it. The face smiles, but not foolishly. A moss beard has started and gives the face a thoughtful look. Travelers have touched the nose so often that it glows. The boy touches it too and makes no wish. The touch alone is worth the moment. Toward afternoon, a bridge appears. Its posts wear shallow cuts that show flood heights from years past. The guard places his palm flat and feels the story of water at his skin. He says that marks like this teach humility faster than sermons. Everyone steps a little softer across the bridge. A way house stands beyond the bridge. Its lintel bears a carved shoe to tell that beds to be bought inside. The shoe has been polished by weather and by hands. The group does not stay. They have promised to make the next hamlet before dark. Still they step under the lintel for the pleasure of the sign and then pass on. Late sun throws long arrows from the marker arms. Shadows point where letters cannot be seen. The boy realizes that a single post teaches in many languages. He says this aloud, and the monk laughs softly and says that wisdom is usually plural. They reach a village where milestones are painted with fresh lime. A child stands on a stool with a brush and careful eyes. She is watched by a grandfather who holds a jar of water to wash drips from the road. The caravan pauses to admire them. The master offers a packet of salt for the stew pot in thanks for work that will help strangers. The child holds the packet as if it were a medal. On the last stretch before camp, they see a cairn that has fallen. Wind or goats or tie has kicked a gap into the side. The group stops without being told. Hands lift stone and set it true. The boy learns the weight that a good stone wants. Not too heavy to break a back, heavy enough to mean something. The cairn stands again and faces the evening like a small tower. Camp settles among ash trees. Someone scratches a simple arrow in the dust near the fire, so that any late comer will know where water lies. Another ties a twist of grass on a branch at shoulder height to keep a sleepy walker from stumbling over a root. The guard sets his staff across two stones to remind himself which way the patrol should begin after the first hour. Markers are not just for roads, they are also for thought. After supper, the monk tells a tale about a pilgrim who carried a pocket full of pebbles. Each time the pilgrim passed a kindness, he set a pebble on a post. Each time he passed a cruelty, he set a pebble on the ground and stepped on it to grind it small. In the end, his pockets were light and the posts were strong. The group likes this story. It makes the night feel useful. Stars come out in their old patterns. A shooting one leaves a brief message in the sky. The boy says the sky carries its own milestones. The guard nods. He points out the belt that shows east at dawn and the curl that warns of late rain. The boy falls asleep, naming shapes to himself so that he will know them later when he wakes on watch. Morning returns. They rise and step back onto the road that continues to right itself under their feet. The first marker of the new day is a cart rut turned to stone by many seasons. The wheel track points straight through a gap in the hedge where a small wind forever sighs. The master points with his whole body. This is the way. The group follows. The markers approve without comment. The gate has opened and the road has delivered its morning gifts. Beyond the shadow of the arch, a stall waits that isn't a stall at all but a quiet promise. Here the day will be made fair. A beam and pans, a set of nested weights that chime softly when lifted, an L staff burnished by 1,000 hands, a square of chalked lines on a plank that remembers every coin that has come to rest upon it. The town calls this place the Way, and the word sounds like both weight and way. The way tells the way in which the world is to be shared. The wayman arrives first. He keeps his hat low to save his eyes for numbers. He sets the beam and strokes the fulcrum like a miller testing flour between forefinger and thumb. He lifts each weight and breathes on it. Not for magic, for habit and respect. Brass keeps the memory of hands and must be reminded to be honest. A clerk follows with the ledger. She walks as if stepping over fine threads, so that none will break. She spreads a square of linen across the table. On the linen she places the book. The binding is cracked at the places the town has argued most fiercely. The clerk smooths a page and lays a small stone on the top edge to keep the breeze from turning the day too quickly. The morning is chill but expectant. The first to approach is a farmer with sacks of rye. He touches the brim of his cap and rests the sack gently on the pan. The beam dips and wobbles, then finds stillness like a bird settling on a branch. The weighman adds a weight, then another, and the beam steadies. The farmer nods when the tally is spoken. He has brought honest grain and knows the measure will speak kindly to him. The clerk records the weight and writes the name as the farmer spells it. She asks if the spelling is the same as last winter. The farmer laughs and says names do not change as fast as weather. The clerk smiles and sets her quill aside long enough to dust the ink with sand. A spinner arrives with hanks of wool. The L staff is fetched. The staff is a story in wood. On one edge are marks for the L and the yard and the handspan. On the other edge are scars from bargaining days when knives tested truth. The spinner draws wool along the staff, and the clerk counts aloud. The spinner listens with a hand on her chest for the comfort of the count. She has lived long enough to know that numbers can be friends when they are measured in the open. The toll is paid for the right to trade inside the gate, not a punishment, a contribution to walls and drains and the torch that must burn at the late hour when a traveler arrives with a sick child. The weighman holds out a small wooden bowl, and the spinner places coins. A clipped edge gleams like a bad idea. The weighman does not frown. He only lays the coin on the beam and sets the smallest weight on the other pan. The truth is revealed without anger. The coin is exchanged for one that rings truer. The clipped piece goes into a pouch that bears a black stitch. Later the mint will weigh that pouch and make its own record. Two brothers bring a wheelbarrow full of apples. Their mother has sent strict instructions. They must pay in coin, they must keep the receipt, they must not fight near the scales. The brothers breathe with care as if air itself might cost extra. The apples are counted into baskets of agreed measure. The clerk makes a small drawing in the margin that shows two boys with serious faces and a tower of apples between them. The boys stand taller after they see the drawing. The measure has given them a shape within the day. A carter with a scar that looks like a quill mark along his jaw comes forward with a bundle of iron nails. He says he found them in a junk lot and has sorted them by size. The weighman pours the nails into a shallow pan to prevent rolling and then lowers the full pan onto the balance. Iron declares itself at once. The beam settles with conviction. The clerk notes the weight and the carter pays the small stall fee that keeps the square clean. He receives a token that will allow his cart to rest in shade at midday. This is a written law. It is the kind that lives in people's heads and is kept by gratitude. A woman arrives from the next village with dyed wool cords coiled in a basket. Her fingertips are blue and she smiles without apology. The weighman admires the even twist and asks about the vat. She tells of the river water at the ford and how a pinch of alum makes the blue decide to stay. The clerk writes not only the numbers, but a note about the method. Records keep more than coin, they keep the wisdom of days. A short line forms, and the line behaves like a small congregation. People stand with the weight of their goods on their hips and the light of the morning on their faces. When the beam is playful and will not settle, there is a common breath of patience. When the beam at last rests level, there is a tiny news of relief that passes from mouth to mouth. The watchman arrives to view the weights. It is his duty to check the stamp on each piece. The stamp is a little tree, and the tree has 7 leaves. When the leaves blur or wear away, the weight must be recast. The watchman turns each piece in the light with slow thumbs. He does not distrust the weighman. He honors the work by honoring the tools. He signs a small card and places it in a wooden slot at the edge of the table. The card says the day began honest. A weaver brings a bolt of cloth. She lays it along the L-staff. The clerk reads out the measure, then lifts the corner to feel the weave. The weaver names the pattern. Goose eye for the small diamonds that look like birds in a line. She laughs when the clerk draws a wobbly diamond in the margin. The weaver pays the toll in a fine mix of coins and buttons. The buttons are for the clerk, who has been saving for a new sleeve. There is no rule for this gift. Gifts do not need rules to be lawful. The sun climbs and finds the brass. The weights glow like captured daylight. A sailor on leave steps up with a coffer of dried fish. He says the sea is windy today, though the town cannot feel it. He slides his coffer onto the pan, and the smell of salt changes the morning in a pleasant way. The weighman nods with eyes that have learned to respect the harvest of every element. The ledger gains a line for fish. The market square gains a promise of stew. A merchant from the south arrives with a small scale of his own. He sets it near the town beam as if proposing a duet. The weighman receives the gesture politely. They test a sample weight together. The 2 scales agree after the tiniest adjustment of the traveler's fulcrum. The merchant smiles, and in that smile is the ease that allows trade to happen between strangers. Trust begins at the level beam. In the lull that follows, the clerk stretches her fingers. She tells the weighman a brief tale about a dream in which the L-staff grew into a tree that bore fruit in even rows. The weighman thinks quietly and says that a straight branch will carry more nests than a crooked one. They both enjoy this thought more than the words can show. Silence is better than chatter when numbers are at work. A tinker steps up with kettles that remember wars with fire. He asks that the weight of each recorded before and after repair, so that he can charge fair for tin and labor. The weighman is pleased with this plan. The clerk draws a little kettle beside the entry and a tiny rivet beside the second line. The tinker is a patient man and carries the look of someone who mends more than metal. He nods to the boys with the apples and tells them that a kettle that pours well makes soup taste kinder. A small drama unfolds near the edge of the line. A youth brings in a sack that sags strangely. He says it holds grain. The weighman unties the mouth and finds stones mixed with barley. The youth does not run. He lowers his eyes and blurts that the stones were meant to guard the grain against mice. The clerk says stones guard nothing, and everyone chuckles. The weighman scoops the stones aside and measures only the barley. He sets the toll fee at a level that leaves the youth chastened but able to try again next week. Mercy is also a kind of measure. The bells of the abbey speak noon. Shadows shorten and then begin to lengthen. The square ripens into its fullest hour. At the way there is no rush, only a steady procession. A baker brings a crate of flour for the pie seller. The crate is weighed and a chalk mark places a secret number on the wood. The pie seller will scrub the mark away after the last tart is sold, so that tomorrow and begin without a whisper of yesterday's count. A pilgrim with dust on his sandals sets a small pouch on the pan. Inside the pouch is a snail shell of mother of pearl and a little silver cross and 3 glass beads the color of a lake in wind. He tells the clerk he cannot pay coin, but he can pay in stories for the children at the abbey school. The clerk nods and writes a different kind of entry. The weighman bows his head as if a bell had just passed overhead. Value has many shapes, and not all of them cast shadows. The watch returns with a man from the mint. The mint man carries a small file and a square of polished stone. He lays a suspect coin on the stone and draws the file once. The shavings tell him their secret. He says the coin is good enough for mild faith. It will return to the mint when the pouch with the black stitch is tallied. Until then it may pass a little while longer and buy bread for those who need bread. The crowd likes this answer. People prefer mercy that has a plan. The afternoon opens itself like a hand. A troupe of traveling musicians step into the square. They are not yet ready to play. First, they must have a license for sound. The clerk shows them a line in the book that says music is welcome until the watch lights the 4th torch along the western lane. The troupe nods and pays with coins that have crossed borders. The weighman tests 2 of the coins for curiosity. The beam answers that music is as respectable as iron nails or rye. A widow with a modest basket of pears takes her turn. She has come not to sell, but to set her basket on the pan and see what her garden is worth. The number is small, her satisfaction is large. She will walk home lighter and proud because the measure has given her a true word to carry. The clerk writes her name and adds a loop that looks like a leaf. The widow laughs like a child who has been seen. A drover moves a line of sheep through the far side of the square. The weighman glances up for the pleasure of the sight. He has learned that balance is it only what happens on the beam. Balance also happens in the heart when work is shared with moments of looking. He looks, he breathes, he returns his eyes to brass and number. Late light slants across the table. The beam throws a shadow that looks like a straight road going somewhere friendly. A merchant of thread arrives with spools arranged like a small army. He pays his toll in coppers that shine from being often counted. He asks whether the town might someday adopt a stamped ribbon as receipt so that customers see at a glance who has passed the way. The clerk writes the idea in the back of the book where hopeful notions are kept. A mother brings her daughter to see their ell staff. The little girl lays both palms against the wood and asks whether she might be measured too. The weighman thinks and decides that it is proper to measure anything that wishes to be known. He marks the girl's height lightly with chalk and tells her that she is as tall as 2 loaves and a little more. She beams in triumph. Numbers to make people larger. An argument approaches in the form of 2 men who speak before they have arrived. One sells honey, the other sells the jars for the honey. They disagree about the fullness of a jar that sits accusingly between them. The wayman listens without taking a side. He wipes the pan and sets the jar upon it. He fills another jar with water to the line that both men can see. He weighs both and draws a conclusion that favors neither and frees both. The men exchange grumbles that are half jokes. The clerk notes the event and draws a tiny B. The day leans toward its quieter hours. The clerk rests her quill and flexes her fingers again. She admits that her hand has learned to think. The wayman smiles and says that his eyes have learned to listen. They agree that the town is better when tools are honest and people speak gently. A final burst of business comes as the shadows lengthen. Caravanners pay for tomorrow's early entry so that the gate to swing without delay. The wayman stamps small slips with a seal that shows the town tree. The slips will be traded at dawn for space inside the line of canvas stalls. The clerk checks each name twice so that a stranger will not be turned away in error. Accuracy is a kind of welcome. A last oddity arrives. A scholar from a distant school brings a bundle wrapped in waxed cloth. Inside are stones from a ruined bridge far up the valley. He wishes to know how heavy a single stone is, so that he may imagine the strength of the old span. The wayman humors him. The stone rests on the pan like a quiet animal. The number that appears surprises Sim the scholar. He writes it down and bows to the beam as if it had told him a holy secret. The first torch is lit along the western lane. The troop begins to play a tune that walks instead of runs. People who have waited for a lull approach the way with small questions. How many ounces make a pound? How many ells in a bolt if one wishes to hang curtains across a narrow window? The clerk answers with fingers and with the patient music of repetition. The wayman listens and corrects nothing. It is a fine thing to witness knowledge given away like bread. The watch returns for the evening check. He touches each weight again. He does not expect change. Habit has its own comfort. He signs the small card for dusk. The card says the day remained honest. The last trader pays the last toll. The ledger wears the soft look of a book that has done a good job of being itself. The wayman breathes on the brass weights one by one and sets them in their nest. The L staff is wrapped in linen and tied with cord that was measured on its own edge many years ago. The table is wiped with a square of salted water so that it will not smell of fish or pears tomorrow. A child arrives with a question that can wait for no morning. He holds a coin that has found its way into his pocket. He asks whether it is a good coin. The wayman places the coin on the pan and sets the baby weight in the other. The beam agrees that the coin is honest. The child nods and puts the coin back where children keep their best treasures. He will buy a ribbon for his mother on the next market day. The clerk makes a line in the ledger that says one more person now trusts the measure. The music fades. The torches draw taller shadows. The square begins to speak in the soft voice of sweeping straw. The wayman and the clerk sit a moment without talk. They listen for any small wrongness left in the air. They hear none. The day has come level and is closing level. They rise. The beam is lifted. The pans are nested. The ledger is bound in its linen. The little stone is placed on top so that tomorrow will begin where today left off. The wayman carries the weights in a chest that hangs against his heart. The clerk carries the book with both arms, as if it were a child that had fallen asleep at a festival. Together they walk toward the gate to speak briefly with the watch. The watch thanks them for their keeping of balance. The wayman says balance is a town-wide thing. The watch agrees. The clerk says that fairness is a habit that must be practiced every day. The watch nods like a bell clapper. They part at the fountain. The water tells its same old story, and nobody is tired of it. The square is almost empty now. A cat checks the table where the weights were kept and finds nothing to chase except moonlight. The cat chases the moonlight anyway. On the road outside the walls, a few carts begin their gentle journey home. They roll through lantern pools and into the patient dark. The numbers of the day ride with them. A yard of cloth that will soon be a sleeve, a pound of nails that will soon be a roof, a toll paid that will soon become a torch at a late hour when someone needs light. The wayman reaches his door. He sets the chest on a shelf that is level because he tested it long ago with a marble and a string and a prayer. He eats bread and a slice of cheese. He writes a tiny note on a scrap that says, "Remember to test the small weight at the latch side." The clerk climbs the stairs to her room, where the window knows the moon. She opens the ledger and reads 3 lines backward, because she likes the way the numbers look when they return to the beginning. She closes the book and rests her palm on the cover. She thinks that measure is only the village word for care. Night fills the spaces between houses. The torches along the lanes burn with an even breath. The town sleeps on the good pillow of fairness. Somewhere a traveler arrives late and finds the 4th torch still burning as promised. The traveler smiles at a town that keeps faith so carefully that even its weights seem to glow. The day ends where it should end, at balance, at quiet, at the simple comfort of a beam at rest. Sleep comes the way a scale settles, not sudden, not slow, simply sure. Dawn puts a pale wash along the ridge while bells murmur from leather straps. Mules stand patient with ears like small sails that catch the morning. The caravan master walks the line and lays a hand on each shoulder. He speaks a short word to each animal. The words are not needed. Habit is the true language here. Still he speaks because kindness makes a road softer. Camps are folded with quiet practice. Bedrolls are wound tight and stowed in the same order every time so that a hand can find what it seeks in darkness. A pot is wiped with dry grass. The last coal is tucked into a tin and so becomes tomorrow's fire. The lead rope is lifted. The first bell answers. The day begins like a tune that everyone knows. The train steps onto the track that skirts the fields and enters the hills. Hooves choose the old prints made by yesterday's journey. Leather creaks in a steady rhythm. The high bundles are wrapped against dew with waxed cloth that smells faintly of honey. A boy walks beside the last mule and studies the way each hoof sets and lifts. The boy learns a rule that all caravan people know. When feet find music, distance becomes gentle. Goods ride quiet above patient backs. Bales of wool that will cross a river and then a second river. jars of dye sealed with wax that will open in a room full of steam and turn plain thread into song. A small chest of books that a monastery will copy until the words live in 3 places at once. The bundles do not boast, they only wait to become useful. The master sets the pace with a length of cord knotted at the rule for the morning. He ties the cord to his belt. When the knot reaches his hip, he will call a halt. Rest is not an accident out here. Rest is a plan. The road rises. Air grows thin and clean. A drover hums to mark the climb. Far below, a mill wheel turns like a slow thought. The caravan does not look back often. Looking back can bend a person out of true. Still, there is a moment when all eyes lift to see the town become a handful of roofs. Someone says that the baker there makes crust that sings as it cools. That is good to remember. Good bread is part of any map. They pass a wayside cross. A scarf hangs from the arm. Faded blue with 3 knots tied for petitions that did not fit into words. The boy asks whether the knots will be answered. The master says that knots are kept by tie, and tie keeps its own counsel. He touches his brow and moves on. Mid-morning brings a ford. Water moves like bright cloth over stone. The lead mule hesitates and then decides that the world continues on the far bank. Hooves find purchase. The bells quiet themselves as if listening to the river speak. The boy watches how the current pulls at legs and learns to read that pull with his own feet. He laughs when his boot finds a hole and he sits in the water like a frog. Laughter dries faster than wool. The train climbs out glittering and new. The road narrows to a rib of earth between 2 folds of slope. Here the guard walks with one hand on the nearest packlash. He checks knots by touch. He knows which knot should feel square and which should feel round. He knows the knot that a certain drover ties when he is sad, and the one he ties when he is thinking of home. He speaks no word. The hand does the speaking. At a sunny patch, the master calls a rest. The animals turn their heads at the same moment as if they share one mind. Packs are eased and straps lie in neat loops on the ground. A rag bag opens with the small theater of repair. A strap hole is punched. A rivet is set. A torn boot heel receives 3 stitches and a prayer. The boy is taught to flip a stone so that its dry side faces out before a person sits. He is told that comfort to be made in small ways anywhere. Food is plain and good. Bread with dried figs tucked inside by a hand that thinks ahead. Cheese wrapped in cloth that will become a bandage if needed. A pinch of salt on the tongue to persuade thirst to drink. Water is shared with animals first. They lower their heads and take patience into themselves. News is shared with food. There is talk of a bridge that a flood has turned slightly. There is talk of a hermit in a cave who now keeps a small garden because the seasons are not a thing to fight forever. There is talk of a patch of wild roses miles ahead that bloom as if the sun itself had drifted down to rest in thorns. This last story is always told and always true in its fashion. The boy hopes to see those roses today. The older hands smile and let hope have its way. The train sets off again. Afternoon light comes soft through cloud, and every saddle takes on the color of smoke. A kestrel hovers. The guard pauses to watch the stillness inside its wings. He thinks that good guarding is like that. movement that looks like not moving. A rider approaches from the north with a skin of water offered as greeting and as tax of goodwill. The master accepts and offers a slice of dried pear. The two trade questions that have answers in common. How is the road? How is the ford? How is the hill wind? They nod with the ease of people whose work is distance. Then the rider is a dark thread moving along a light field, and then he is a memory. They pass a shrine of stones stacked in a manner that looks both random and chosen. The boy adds a pebble and chooses not to wish aloud. He wishes with his shoulders instead, by taking more weight from the next animal's load during a steep patch. The mule flicks an ear. Agreement given. Near twilight, they reach a meadow where caravanners have camped for generations. A circle of blackened stones waits like old friends. Packs are eased to the ground with gratitude that is felt all the way to the ankles. Bells are hung on a rope so that night to hear the herd even when eyes are closed. A pot is lifted. The last coal from the morning wakes in its tin and steps back into flame. The master walks the perimeter and sets simple signs. A triad of twigs for the path to water, a knot in grass at ankle height to warn of a hole along the downhill side. He uses a stick to trace the night latrine. The stick will be thrown into the morning fire to keep things orderly. He isn't strict so much as he is practiced. Supper is barley with bits of dried fish and a leaf of bay that someone has carried for luck. The spoon goes round and no one counts too closely, because counting is for the ledger at the town and not for the circle of the fire. A story is told that does not hurry. It is about a pack mule that learned to refuse a certain ford after a spring flood. The refusal saved the whole line 2 years later when the bank went soft without warning. The moral is a useful one. Respect the memory of beast. The boy asks about thieves. The guard taps the hilt of a short cudgel and says that trouble prefers noise, and this train does not make much. He says that a calm face is often worth more than a blade. He says that a watch set properly gives sleep to those not on watch, and sleep is armor. The boy nods and sits a little taller. A traveling singer passes the camp and is invited to the edge of the fire. He sings a road song that has been mended many times. Every singer sews a new line where the last singer left a space. Tonight the song gains a verse about a cat that crowned itself at a market fountain. The verse fits better than anyone expects and will likely survive a dozen seasons. Night deepens. Stars take their places the way careful merchants take theirs at the market. The bells on the rope hush to a slow pattern that even a child can read. The first watch walks the line and checks on the boy who is asleep before he knows he is allowed to sleep. The boy smiles in a dream where the roses are real and everywhere. The guard places a blanket more snug around him and moves on. Before dawn, the master wakes and looks at the world without moving. He listens to the animals breathing and to the small rustle that means the river is near. He counts the breaths of a watchman he cannot see. Counting other people's rest is how a leader studies the health of the group. The count pleases him. He closes his eyes for the last small piece of night. Morning comes on the quiet feet of birds. The pot is rekindled, the line is raised, The bells begin their walk. The tatches on the master's cord say that today will be a long pull and a friendly one. Packs are checked with the same patience as yesterday and with the same care as tomorrow will receive. They move, the road widens, and a view opens that makes people fall silent without reason. Far off, a river spills light. Near at hand, a fox watches with the grave air of an innkeeper. The master lifts his hand for a slow halt so that everyone may look their fill. No words are used for several minutes because words would be too narrow. Then the line walks on and takes the view into its packs without adding weight. At the next village, the train will spread into the square like a long story finding its chapters. Dyes will meet cloth, salt will meet fish, news will meet ears that needed it. The boy will watch the weighman and learn how numbers can be fair when laid out in the open. When evening comes, the line will form again, and the road will collect them as a river collects small boats. For now the train crosses a small bridge that sings under weight. The master taps the rail with his knuckle, and the bridge answers with a note that says, "The timbers are well." The guard smiles at the sound. He says that a bridge that sings is a friend. The boy listens and nods, because music has become the grammar of his feet. They make the last rise before the day's rest. The sky opens like a hand in peace. The line moves through that open palm and finds a flat where grass will be soft tonight. Someone begins the fire before the master asks. Someone else fetches water before the cup is shown. The day has taught everyone the shape of evening. The boy finds a wild rose after all. Only one bloom, but perfect and red as a secret. He does not pick it. He looks and carries the looking back to camp. He tells the rose that he will see its cousins further on. The rose believes him because people on the road learn to keep their promises. The bells hush. The stars take a slow breath. The train sleeps with the ease earned by distance walked well. The road lies attentive as a good host, and the night keeps safe watch. The road narrows until it becomes a thought that must cross water. Ahead the river moves with the calm work of a giant. On the near bank a bridge reaches from stone to stone with timber ribs that show the craft of many winters. On the far bank a ferry waits in its slip with a rope stretched like a steady idea from shore to shore. Travelers slow, some will take the bridge, some will float the old way. Both paths are true. The bridge keeper steps from his house that leans into the abutment like a contented cat. He carries a mallet for the soundings he makes each morning. He taps a post and listens. He taps a beam where the road boards meet and waits for the note that says sound. The note rings right today. He nods to the caravan and pulls his cap low to hold in the good news. Before crossing, anyone stops to look upriver, a habit as wise as checking the sky before a field is cut. The water hums against pilings. A tree trunk travels by with the slow dignity of a ship that has retired from sails. The ferryman raises a hand in greeting from the far slip. The bridge keeper waves back. The river sees both and approves. The caravan takes the bridge first. Animals step from plank to plank and learn at once that the surface speaks a slightly different language. Hooves drum, nails sing. The span bows a hair and then straightens. The guard watches the pace and keeps space between carts so that the bridge is treated like a living thing that deserves courtesy. The boy stares down through the boards at water sliding under his steps and feels taller for trusting timbers. Halfway across, they pause at a bay cut for passing. The bridge keeper has set window holes in the railing so a person can see how the current writes its letters around each pier. The boy reads the letters as if they are a secret alphabet and tries to guess which letter means eddy and which means depth. The monk beside him smiles and does not correct. Learning that begins with wonder keeps its feet longer than learning that begins with answers. A gust comes low along the river surface and climbs the posts as wind will do. The bridge moves a finger width to share the push. The movement is his threat, it is wisdom. The master says softly that a bridge that refuses to bend will not keep its promises. The boy tucks that sentence into the pocket where he keeps foxtails and good luck knots. On the far end, the keeper has hung a small board that reads in plain letters, "Walk with care, and the bridge will carry your care forward." Someone has drawn a smiling face under the words. The face has survived many rains. Jests that wish people well have long lives. Once across, they stand and watch the ferry for the pleasure of watching. The ferryman brings it in on a sweep. He works the pole and then eases the line through his palm. The boat kisses the dock and stays as if tethered by affection. He swings the gate, and 4 villagers roll a cart aboard with that wonderful, awkward grace of people who like each other. The ferryman keeps a ledger no thicker than a glove. It holds names and times and the curious notes he loves to make. Old woman with green scarf who sings to goats. Young carpenter with new plane who planed the ferry bench for a ride. Boy who can skip a stone 7 bounces. The ledger has kept better company than most books. The caravan chooses to send 1 cart back across, using the ferry, so that the child could say he has done both. The keeper laughs and agrees that this is proper training for a road mind. The mule walks aboard with the measured calm of a monk. The gate closes with a clean latch. The ferryman leans into the pole, and the boat leaves the dock with that satisfying hush that boats know when they part from wood. On the river, the world slows without becoming dull. The child sees bubbles push like coins from the ferry beam. He sees minnows fret at the bow. He feels the grip of the current and the quiet strength of the rope above. The ferryman shows him the knot that holds the sliding pulley and tells him its name. The knot sounds like a friendly dog. The child repeats it twice for memory. A heron beats the air and crosses low as if to oversee the work. Its legs trail like thin branches. Its eyes read the ferry as one reads a line of script. The boy raises a hand. The heron keeps its counsel and lands on the far bank with tidy knees. At midstream, the ferryman rests the pole and lets the boat lean into the rope. He tells a story about the spring when the river tried to carry off the landing. He says neighbors came with spikes and timbers and stood knee-deep in cold to hand the river back its manners. The boy listens and understands that water has moods the way people do. He understands also that moods can be met with patience and stout work. They reach the near slip and the gate opens. The mule walks off with the same calm with which it walked on. The child thanks the ferryman with a bow that is almost too serious to bear. The ferryman bows back with equal gravity. People enjoy make ceremonies when the river has been kind. Business happens on riverbanks without a market bell. Fish are traded for onions. A pair of boots is swapped for a jar of dye powder that has traveled many days from the south. The bridgekeeper buys a small cone of saffron to carry to his wife because she loves to see rice wear the color of late leaves. The ferryman acquires a whetstone for his pole tip. Everyone gains something that will be useful later. The master inspects the ferry cable where it climbs the far bank. He rubs tallow along a rough patch and shows the boy how the fiber learns to lie back down. He explains that a little care here will save an hour of mending next month. Work spent early is a friend to the work of tomorrow. The boy nods through the clean logic and stores it with other A to B truths that make the world kinder. Clouds stack in the west. The river darkens by a shade. The keeper walks the length of the bridge and checks wedges that hold rail planks. He hums the same 4 notes he hums every day. If the bridge ever answers wrong, he will know at once by the change in echo. Today the echo is faithful. A pair of traders arrive with a wagon whose wheel has begun to complain. The bridgekeeper kneels with them and shows how to lift the axle using a lever and 2 blocks. The ferryman brings grease from his shed. The wheel is eased off and set on a canvas sheet. A pin is polished, a burr is filed. The wheel returns to its life with a glow of relief. The traders pay in laughter and in the promise to tell the story of the helpful rivermen at the next town. Near dusk, the ferry takes on 3 pilgrims with light packs and good manners. They hold their hats in their hands and listen to the water as if it were a teacher. The ferryman tells them that the river knows the route to the sea and never gets lost. He says that learning 1 strong path can be better than learning 100 weak ones. The pilgrims smile as if a blessing has been delivered in a shape they to carry. On the bridge, the caravan begins its return to the road. The boy asks to walk, and the master allows it. The boy paces planks and keeps count. He makes a game of stepping only on boards that have a darker grain. He notices a small carving near the center where someone long ago scratched a fish. He presses his finger to the fish, as others have, and feels the wood smoother there. He whispers a wish that he will see the sea someday. The bridgekeeper lights small lamps along the railing. He does not set a bright line, he sets dim invitations to care. The lamps tell feet where to fall and tell hearts to slow before the drop into night. The ferryman lights a lantern in the window of his shed. It is a promise that if late travelers arrive, they will not find the landing blind. The river takes both lights and writes them into its surface as brief poems. Before leaving, the caravan brings bread and a small wheel of cheese to the keeper and the ferryman. Gifts given to river people are never wasted. The keeper breaks the bread and gives half back. The ferryman cuts the cheese and sends a wedge back to the boy who had counted boards. Sharing here is as natural as current. The road lifts away from the bank, and the sounds of water thin to a murmur that rides in the ears for miles. The carts move with fresh ease, as if having crossed had lightened them. The boy turns once to see the ferry nose into its slip, and the bridge hold the last lamp like a quiet star hung at waist height. He waves, and the river waves back in its many-fingered way. They camp within sight of the line of willows that marks the floodplain. Supper carries a little river taste because the breeze has remembered it. People speak softly, as if the water can still hear them. The master says they will return by this path in a fortnight, if the road agrees. He adds that bridges and ferries like to be visited more than once each season. The group agrees with the comfort that comes from having found a good crossing. Night sets a silver coin on the water and leaves it there. The far bank is a darker stripe. A single owl passes above and reads the river the way a scholar reads a page. Sleep comes and brings a dream of planks that stretch underfoot and of a small boat that moves without hurry. In the dream, both paths meet in the middle and shake hands. Morning will show prints of hooves and boots leading to the approaches. The prints will turn and go on. New prints will arrive and will also go on. The bridge will take the day with its ribs, and the ferry will take the day with its rope. Between them, the river will keep its story and make room for all the smaller stories upon it. The road bends around a copse of alder, and the travelers see it at once. A small house of wood no taller than a mule's shoulder, set on a post that has learned patience. The shrine has a roof of shakes and a window of horn that turns light to butter. Inside stands a figure carved by a careful hand. The figure does not declare a name. It wears a simple smile and holds one palm open toward the lane. People slow without being told. A caravan can move like a single animal when something kind appears. The master gives the signal, and the line eases to the verge where nettles make a brave fence. The guard checks the ground with the toe of his boot for holes. Finding none, he nods. The group gathers. The shrine shows its life in small things. Soot along the horn from candles set close. A raster of wax drips hardened like a rippled field. Bits of ribbon sun-faded to gentle colors. A bird on the ridgepole that argues gently with a spider for roof rights. A clay bowl sits on a shelf. In it are 3 peas, a straight pin, 2 chestnuts, and a coin smoothed nearly flat by many thumbs. A woman steps forward with a jar of clean water. She pours a little into the clay bowl and wipes the rim with her scarf. She places a sprig of thyme beside the figure. Her brother sets a pebble on the post foot to pay the old toll that no one collects anymore. The child offers a small drawing on rough paper. A house with smoke, a river that runs uphill, a cart with wheels so round they are perfect circles. The drawing is accepted at once because shrines are good judges of gifts. The figure holds a palm outward. The wood shines where many hands have touched it, the way a stair rail in a busy inn gleams from across a room. The boy wants to touch, but hesitates. The master nods, and the boy lays his hand to the palm. He feels wood and also the memory of wood. He takes his hand away, and his face has the look of someone who has heard a sentence in a language he is learning and understood it whole. A monk examines the post with a carpenter's interest. He finds small repairs pinned with careful pegs. He says that the work is the work of a person who knows love without fuss. He points out a little brace tucked under the shelf. He remarks that a shelf that holds offerings should never sag, even if the offerings are pebbles and leaves. The guard agrees and makes a note to bring a square nail on the return journey, just in case. The air is bright with bees. Someone has set a straw skep near the hedge, and the bees use the shrine as a turning point on their way to the orchard beyond. Travelers keep still so that the small workers may pass. The sound is a low gold hum that warms the ears. A woman who keeps bees at home shows the child how to stand easy when a bee considers a sleeve as a landing field. She says that fear smells like smoke, and there is no need for smoke when there is no fire. A story is told about the beginning of the shrine. Once a wagon shed its wheel here, and the driver despaired. A stranger came and mended the wheel using a branch cut with a borrowed knife and a bootlace that had seen many miles. The wheel held through a storm, and the stranger vanished the next day. The driver returned and set the shrine as thanks to the road for sending help when it was needed and not when it was not. The story has been changed by many tongues, but the feeling of it fits the place. The master takes from his pouch a small square of glass with a flaw that runs like a frozen river. He sets it where the horn window sits, and the shrine takes on a mild gleam, as if seeing itself in a mirror. He says the glass is a promise in case the horn cracks in winter. The monk writes this kindness in a tiny book. Records of good acts travel farther than wagons. A peddler arrives from the other direction. He carries far too much on his shoulders, but he carries it with craft. He bows to the shrine and to the people and sets a bell on the shelf. The bell is no bigger than a walnut, and it will ring only for a wind that knows the right tune. The peddler says that the bell will remind birds to wish us well. Everyone decides this is true. The guard inspects the ground around the post and sees that rain has cut a little gutter. He fetches a spade from a cart and makes a neat channel that will lead water away from the stake. He tampers the dirt with the flat of the blade, and the sound is tidy. The child copies the motion with a stick and feels taller. The road asks politely for the caravan to move on. The sun has a shadow closer to the west than to noon. The master agrees, but calls for a short spell of rest in a circle near the shrine so that people could eat with a sense of being watched over. They sit in the grass. Bread appears. Cheese, a few dried pears. A boy lays a single raisin on the shelf for the figure, and the figure appears to consider the offering seriously. As they eat, travelers speak of other shrines, one near the marsh where lanterns are left for fishermen who return late, one under a great oak where a wooden horse guards children against falling from real horses, one at a bend near a quarry where the figure wears a chip in its brow, and the chip is believed to take the bad luck for stones that might jump from carts. The boy listens with eyes that travel even while his feet are still. A wind lifts. The horn window drinks the light and turns it soft. On the far field, a scarecrow lifts an arm and makes a friendly oath without meaning to. The sound of the road becomes a little river of cart whispers and boot tapping. It is tide. They rise. Before leaving, the master sets a small wooden sign at the verge. It carries an arrow carved by a patient knife and 4 words carved by the same hand. Safe water beyond hedge. He points to the gap where a spring puddles between roots. The sign is not for the caravan. It is for the next group that might pass at dusk. The group approves with the kind of silence that love uses when it is busy. They step back onto the road, and the shrine becomes a small watchman behind them. The boy turns to wave, and the figure appears to lift its open palm higher. Even if it is only a trick of light, it is a good trick. The road continues through barley and then through a patch of wood. The light breaks into coins on the ground. A jay complains about everything and nothing. The cart with the loose pot now sings in a better key because the guard has mended the strap with a bit of waxed cloth from the repair bag. The caravan moves at the pace of an honest heart. Toward afternoon, clouds gather into an army that wishes to look stern. The master names a hamlet ahead and says they will reach it with a dry back if they keep a faithful step. The shrine falls out of sight but stays in mind. People carry quiet like a filled cup. No one spills. Rain begins as a test and then becomes full study. Hoods go up. A top comes down over the chest that holds dyed thread. The mule who dislikes wet ears is given an extra wrap and told comforting lies that all veterans understand. The road darkens, but the ruts guide like rails. At the last bend before the hamlet, a new thing stands by the hedge. It is another shrine, smaller, newer, a child of the first. Someone has copied the shape but not the face. This figure is simply a smooth stone held in a wooden hand. The hand holds the stone out as if inviting others to add their own. The bowl is already half full of pebbles. The caravan stops again, though rain says hurry. People smile and add stones. The act is quick and has the power of something old. They reach the inn yard as the first hard drops become a soft drum. The innkeeper laughs at the sight of travelers who look like beavers. He helps pull tops and ushers animals under a lean-to. He asks whether the shrine is keeping well this season. The master says it is more than well. He tells of the new small shrine by the bend. The innkeeper nods as if a family has grown. Inside, steam rises from a pot. Boots are stacked under benches. A cat patrols the table feet with the gravity that all cats study in their first year. People eat with the appetite that rain earns. There is talk of the road tomorrow and of the repairs that a cartwheel will need in the morning. But there is also talk of the figure on the shelf that needed only touch to shine. It is pleasant to think of such a thing while rain writes its many names on the roof. Night settles, friendly now that roofs are near. The innkeeper sets a small candle in his own window out of habit. He says it is for travelers who must walk by late, for the sick child carried by a parent, for the carter who took longer to load than he planned, for the stranger who does not yet know where the lane turns to the bridge. He does not say it is for himself, though everyone understands that to be true as well. In their beds, people drift towards sleep. The boy asks whether shrines sleep. The mother says they rest with their eyes open. He finds this perfect. He dreams he is a wooden figure with a hand open to the road, and in his palm butterflies come to rest, and then lift one by one like coins becoming birds. Morning brings a light that has washed itself. The caravan sets out with boots that are clean up to the ankles and muddy below, which is the right way round. They pass the small new shrine and see that 3 more stones have been added in the night. They pass the old shrine and see that the sprig of thyme has dried into a memory of green. The figure watches them pass with the same open hand and the same good patience. The travelers lift their palms in answer as they walk. The road runs forward and the day moves with it. Behind them the shrine keeps its post and holds the quiet ground. That is all it asks and all it needs. The road grows quiet between towns, and the travelers look for a place that has learned to hold fire without complaint. They find a circle of stones scored black by many nights. A yew leans near with branches that repel rain, and a bank of earth on the north side offers shelter from wind. The master says this will do. The group unshoulders packs, and the evening begins. A cleared space is made with careful feet. Dry twigs are gathered from the lee of hedges. No one breaks branches from living trees. The boy is taught to feel a twig for the sound that says, "Ready." He learns soft from dead, and the difference pleases him. The guard scrapes a little hollow for the first coal, so that flame will sit low and not announce itself to unwelcome eyes. Fire comes from a tin that carries yesterday forward. The coal takes breath and becomes a small orange kernel of will. The boy holds his palms in a cup and blows as he was shown. The coal wakes fully and grips the twigs. Flame climbs politely. It has the manners of a guest who knows this house well. A pot is hung from a stake between forked sticks. Water goes in, and then a handful of barley, and then torn leaves from a cabbage that has seen 2 markets. A sliver of salt is added with reverence. The smell says supper, and the word spreads along the hedgerow. A bird takes note and offers a comment that is half melody and half opinion. Boots come off, ankles sigh, someone rubs tallow into a strap, and someone else stones a knife edge in slow circles that do not insist. Repairs belong to evening. They grow best beside talk, and not in the noon heat of tasks. The guard sets 3 stones as a trivet and mutters the names of people he has guarded in other years. He thanks them for their patience. Stories are offered like slices of bread. A woman tells of a crossing in fog when a donkey decided to lead and proved right. A man tells of sleeping inside a church while hail scolded the roof. A boy confesses that he once ate a whole jar of honey meant for trade and tried to hide the crime by putting pebbles at the bottom. Everyone laughs until they cough. The boy bows and promises to commit better mistakes in the future. The campfire teaches economy. Wood stacked with care burns bright and slow. Sparks lifted high are fewer when flames lean inward to each other. The pot murmurs about patience. The smell of barley and cabbage becomes a kind of song. People have learned to tune their hunger to this song. They do not poke the pot. They wait until the tune resolves. A harp appears from a case made of patched leather. The player tunes by memory and by the breath of the night air. The notes drop like coins into a still well and reappear as soft echoes that make faces gentler. The child with the fox dream hums a simple counter line, and the player nods without looking. Roadcraft is traded as seriously as any coin. How to lay boots on their sides so they dry without curling. How to pack a blanket so it can be pulled free with one hand in the rain. How to fix a sandal strap with a sliver of green wood that will dry to fit by morning. The group keeps the best tricks in common. It is a library without shelves. A traveler, not of the group, walks out of the dusk with hands raised and the right sort of caution. The master greets him with a spare sentence and an open palm. The stranger shows an empty scabbard to say that he comes in peace. He offers a string of dried mushrooms as guest gift. He earns a bowl of stew and a place near the warmth. The circle grows by one, and everyone feels richer. The stranger is a road painter. He carries small pots of lime wash and a brush wrapped in cloth. He marks stones for villages that cannot always spare tithe for it. He asks only meals and a place under eaves for a night. He speaks of paths where markers are kind, and of one valley where stones seem to move when no one looks. The group enjoys the notion and makes up explanations. Foxes, spirits, frost heave with good manners. The stew is ready. Bowls are passed hand to hand. There is an order that honors hunger without letting it lead. Elders first, children next. Travelers who have come late are brought forward even if they would rather be shy. The first spoonful is taken together. A small pause follows as everyone honors those who gave field and hand to the meal. The pause makes the food taste better. After bowls are cleared, a kettle is filled for a drink that is mostly water but feels like a celebration. Mint leaves are crushed between palms to release a promise of green. The kettle sings for a moment and then rests while the leaves share their stories. Cups are warmed and passed. A few grains of sugar are offered from a jar that is closed again as if it were a box of stars. Conversation falls into quiet eddies. A girl stitches a tear in a sleeve with thread pulled from the hem of her skirt. The road does not mind such thrift. The guard writes a small map on a flat stone with a coal from the fire. He draws a line for tomorrow and circles the places where shelter might wait. The boy watches and learns how to guess distance by the time a kettle needs to smile. The stranger produces a tiny book filled with sketches of markers and bridges and faces seen for only a moment at a crossing. He shows a page where a watchman lights the fourth torch on a lane. The light has been made with a dab of yellow that the painter says he crushes from a stone found near the coast. The group looks long at this page. It makes night feel friendly. The fire settles into its steady heart. Coals resemble a small village seen from a hill. Black roofs, red windows, a little lane where a spark walks. The harp gives one last chord and goes quiet. Crickets take the tune and keep it without need of thanks. Watches are set, first and second and so on. The master puts the boy on the last part of the night when owls trade posts and when dreams are thin enough to look through. He says the boy will stand with a grown person who snores softly during peace and wakes sharply at trouble. The boy nods with a solemn pride that does not spoil his grin. Bedrolls are unrolled in a pattern that creates small alleys so that people to rise without stepping on sleeping ribs. Boots stand like soldiers at attention at the foot of each blanket. Packs sit as silent neighbors. The guard scrapes a mark in the dirt that points to the water bucket so that a sleepy walker will not confuse it with the pot of embers. The stranger offers a last gift. He paints a tiny arrow on the underside of the top stone in the ring. It points toward the next creek. He says the mark will show itself when someone lifts the stone in need. It will be invisible otherwise. The group approves. Help that hides until called is a clever sort of help. Sleep takes most of the circle. The watch listens to the slope of the wind and to the odd cries of small lives that own the hedgerow. A fox passes and leaves an orderly pawprint in ash as if to sign the guest book. The stars hang like a pocket full of nails, ready for building morning. Near dawn, the boy wakes for his watch. The world is the color of tin, and then of pewter, and then of a coin that has been warmed by a palm. He walks the edge of the fire and stirs the smallest coal to keep a glow alive for tea. He feels big and careful at the same time. He thinks of bridges and ferries and shrines, and he feels that the road is a conversation with many voices. Birds begin. First one, then five, then the many. The kettle smiles, the master rises, the watch reports nothing to report, which is one of the finest sentences the road can hear. People stretch and thank their blankets for being blankets. The stranger repacks his paints and leaves a mark on a roadside stone before he goes. It is a circle with 3 dots for fire and for friends and for the travel between them. Camp is struck with the same respect used to build it. Coals are drowned and stirred and drowned again until the ground drinks and sends back only cool silence. The stone ring is rebuilt so the next travelers will know a welcome is waiting. The little arrow under the top stone is checked and then covered again. The place looks as if a soft wind rearranged it and nothing more. Breakfast is a slice of bread with the last of last night's cheese and a word each of encouragement. The road receives them. They step off with the long stride that a good rest gives. The campfire behind them keeps its lesson. Bright where tended, modest when done, a friend that teaches without scolding. By midday the circle of stones is only a memory and a warm place in the chest. The boy carries a coal of that warmth tucked into his mind the way a tin carries the next flame. He knows they will build another fire when the day is done. He does not worry about where. The road has more homes than any map could show. The last strokes of the curfew bell tremble into silence, and the narrow streets of the town sink into hush. Within a modest timbered house off the square, a single candle burns steady in an upper window. Its light falls across a small bedchamber where night is slowly being made ready, not by magic, but by calm, careful hands. Lady Onwin moves quietly, skirts brushing the rush-strewn floor. She is neither young nor old, but practiced in the art of evening, the gentle closing of one day and the welcoming of rest. Her hair is already unbound, falling in a pale braid down her back. Her gown is simple wool, softened by years of wear. She works without haste, letting the room settle with each small task. The shutters are closed first. She draws them in against the night air, fastens the wooden bar, and checks the cloth tucked to stop drafts. Outside, a last cart rattles home, but the sound comes muted now, safe behind timber and linen. She opens the small latch of the casement just long enough to breathe the cool evening stone, faint river scent, a trace of baking from the far baker's row, and then closes it again, satisfied. At the hearth, a low fire smolders. Anwin kneels to bank it with ash and a single split log, enough to keep the chill off without wasting wood. Sparks glow and then settle to a dim red, casting long, gentle shadows on the plastered walls. She sets a small iron pot on the trivet to warm a little water mixed with herbs for night comfort, a pinch of chamomile, a crumble of dried apple peel, a few mint leaves. The scent blooms green and sweet. The bed itself waits in quiet invitation. Its frame is oak, plain but sturdy, with carved leaves worn smooth where hands have rested for decades. She pulls back the coverlet, shakes out the linen sheets, and smooths them with slow palms. The mattress is straw newly fluffed at the harvest. She kneads it here and there to chase any lumps. Over the footrail she lays a quilt of faded but beloved pattern, and at the pillow's edge she tucks a sprig of lavender saved from summer. On the chest near the bed stands a small wooden box filled with night things, a comb, a wax tablet for stray thoughts, a tiny vial of oil for dry hands. Anwen opens it and takes the comb, drawing it through her long braid with steady strokes. Each pass releases the day's last tangles, the scent of soap and faint beeswax rising. She winds the hair into a loose coil and pins it with a single carved bone pin, then rubs the oil into her palms and along her temples. The candle on the wall shelf burns low but bright enough for her last quiet tasks. She takes a cloth and wipes the small window glass clear of soot. She straightens the stool where she will lay her cloak. A pair of shoes is set side by the hearth, each with a little wad of wool to dry and warm them. She picks up the day's sewing, an unfinished linen cuff, and tucks it into a basket with its needle secure, so no prick will surprise her in the morning. From the warming pot she pours the fragrant herb water into a clay cup and carries it to the bed. She sits, the quilt pooled around her, and sips in silence. Outside, the last dog bark fades. A watchman calls the hour somewhere far off. Her shoulders sink. The drink is gentle, coaxing her breath to slow, filling the chamber with the soft smell of apple and chamomile. There is a small ritual she keeps, opening the wax tablet and writing with its stylus any thought that might trouble her sleep, a task for tomorrow, a worry for a neighbor, a prayer for her sister's child. She does this slowly, the scratching sound small but sure. Then she closes the tablet and sets it beneath the cup. The thought is put aside, safe until dawn. Before extinguishing the light, Anwen kneels by the bed and prays in the old, simple way. Thanks for the day's work, for safe return from market, for the bread that baked well, for neighbors unharmed. She names those who might need comfort and ends with a soft sign of the cross. The hush afterward feels deeper, as if the room itself breathes. She slips beneath the linen, pulls the quilt to her chin, and lies listening a while. The faint creak of timbers cooling, the hush of the banked fire, the rustle of night outside, all these gather like a lullaby. The candle gutter flickers, but she does not yet snuff it. She watches the flame dance against the beams, a small, steady friend in the dark. On the beam above the hearth hangs a tiny charm of pewter, a crescent moon and stars. Her father hung it there when she was a child, say it would keep sleep gentle. She touches it now, a habit more than a belief, and smiles. The lavender at her pillow releases its faintest breath, summer remembered even in autumn's chill. Finally, she reaches for the snuffer, a plain iron cone on a short handle. She cups her other hand around the candle's base to catch wax and lowers the cone until the light bows and goes out with a small sigh. Darkness fills the room, but it is soft, perfumed with herbs and clean linen. She settles deeper, feeling the day truly close. Sleep comes not as a sudden fall, but as a tide rising gentle and sure. First she thinks of the market and its bright apples, then of her sister's letter, then nothing at all. The hearth ember glows faintly across the room, a single coal keeping watch. Somewhere in the town, bells will strike the next hour, but she will not hear. In this chamber, carefully readied, night holds her safe. Outside, the wind whispers along the street, shutters creak and settle. The candle on the wall shelf cools to pale wax. All the small acts of preparation, fire banked, bed smoothed, lavender laid, are now invisible but powerful, shaping a peace where dreams may wander untroubled.